All right. Are you ready?
Mhm.
Okay. Let me introduce us back in. All right, welcome back. That was part one. Part two. Right now, we're going to get into a conversation about cultural responsiveness. I just got on my phone and looked it up because I was like, what does that even mean? Am I being culturally responsible right now? What should we be doing to be better citizens on this planet? So, pass it off again to our guest, and we're going to have a conversation. All right. I had to run and use the restroom, but we're back here now. So let's keep the combo going.
No problem. That's good. All right. So yes, culturally responsive, and what does that mean? And culturally responsive doesn't only apply to education, and that's what a lot of people need to understand. It does apply in businesses. It applies just into day to day, and how we even teach our children to interact with those outside of our culture, or those outside of even our family. And so as an educator, and as someone who puts together professional development for teachers as well as organizations, some things to think about is how are you centering and valuing students or people in your organization, and how are you centering those around their identity and their culture. The other way that you can do it is using like rigorous and relevant curriculum. So when we're talking about the curriculum that's being taught to students in any grade, if it's anti-oppressive and using anti-oppressive teaching methods. And so, of course, right now in the world of education, using the word oppression is very, a touchy subject, but it still is a relevant fact because a lot of districts have outsourced, old curriculum that is not updated. And, a lot of even the verbiage and the pictures in the curriculum isn't either relevant to the student or relevant to the times that we're in currently.
Can I ask questions?
Yes, ask questions, please.
Okay. So when you say like taking out terms like oppression, is that like in them describing like American history type of oppression, like like transatlantic slavery and chattel slavery? Like what type of?
Yeah, we could go there. It could be that deep. And it could be something as, relevant, like here in the U.S., schools are built based off of the number of third graders that are failing in state standardized testing. And that is a way to kind of predispose these kids into possibly the jail system. There is a whole school to prison pipeline. That is a whole conversation. And, if anybody hasn't looked up or heard research on that, that is a form of oppression. And it's not necessarily oppressing one group of people, but it is something that happens because you tend to see in certain communities, again, taxes put money into the schools. So if you are in a low income or low economic community, your school is not going to be as your students may be more likely to end up in prison because of those things. And it has like a lot to do with a lot and behavior.
Is that like systemic oppression?
Yes, we could say systemic oppression.
So how do you put systemic oppression in the current curriculum?
So you probably won't.
How do you tell the system to fix what?
Yes. So again, talking systems can be kind of difficult. And again, I'm speaking from an educator's lens. It's not about blaming people currently for what has happened in the past. What needs to happen and what typically happens right now is we constantly have these discussions on what, being insensitive to cultures, or you're not being culturally responsive to certain students, or understanding the communities in which you teach in or in which you work in, and not understanding that really kind of leads to maybe unintentional ways of reacting to children's behavior or interacting with students who kind of think differently. And so when we're talking about curriculum in particular, it is more about representation. And how are people presented and represented in books. And so I'll give you just a straight fact of, most U.S. history books, they talk about Black people from the start of slavery. And we don't
Right.
start from slavery, you know, and Black culture has kings and queens, like just like every other culture has some type of royalty,
government, monarchs,
all of those things. And, you know, but and from the sense of that term oppression, it's shown to students in school from an early age. This is where, you know, we start. And then, you know, you have Egyptians, right? But people in curriculum and just kind of the way it's laid out, Egyptian doesn't even look like it's part of Africa.
It's like right next to the Greeks too.
Right.
And there's a vast thousands of years between those time periods. Yeah.
And so, you know, people just want accurate history. It's not about giving visuals about slavery. It's not about, you know, just being harsh towards the opposite, the oppressor in whatever sense, because in between any and all cultures, there is some type of oppression, there is some type of racism, there is some type of certain things that have happened between groups of people. But it's more about how are you accurately talking about it and what is being demonstrated. And as we learned, you know, here in the U.S., and we've known for a long time that the truth just isn't told because of the reasons, you know, they want to keep people oppressed for whatever reason. And so what has been advocated for in the education community is representation of people, but also positive, you know, imaging, positive things about people of certain cultures and ethnicities, because one person who was of a certain culture, I'll give you 9/11, doesn't mean that all Arabs are of, you know, that same thing. And so it's kind of like, how do we address it without, you know, trying to make somebody feel bad for something that has happened, maybe through their lineage, but also it's more of advocating for, okay, why in 2023 are we still seeing, I just saw a post, we have the first Black male I don't know, director of one of the college's programs, like all of these like firsts things, right? And of course, there's going to be a lot of firsts for a lot of people, but why is it you when you keep seeing it be the certain group of people being a first of something, like all of these years later, it just doesn't make sense to me.
I think that, so we want to acknowledge when someone crosses like a threshold and they did something. But then you're also acknowledging that they're the only one in their group to have done that.
Yes.
So is it even necessary to say they're the only person in their group if they're part of the collective group of whatever we're calling? Are we calling it humans, or are we calling like whatever?
You're singled out.
Yeah. So what it comes down to me is a type of tribalism in which people are constantly going to be, you know, hey, our shit's better.
Right.
Our shit's better.
Yeah.
And then, you know, particular entities got together that can control the narrative to push an image of we're better. Mm-hmm. So there is some deprogramming that we're doing in this process of language, just how we speak to each other, how we speak about other people. I definitely feel you on that. Okay, so you can continue.
No, and that's a great point, because even in an organizational sense, you know, we have, I was just talking to a partner of mine, and, you know, we have all of these organizations, and the big thing on big corporate organizations is how do they support Black owned or minority owned or this owned, that owned, all these things. But why are we just not supporting them?
Yeah.
Why is it have to be a subcategory of support?
Yeah.
You just support them like you support anybody. So it shouldn't be, you know, separated. Yeah. And I think that's, it's very like a psychological war, kind of between ourselves and, you know, how do we rectify it? And sometimes it can be oversensitivity too. Do we need still the recognition at this type of level? Or do we want to be identified as Black owned, or we're just a business owner? But, you know, so I think it has a lot to do with identity, but it has a lot to do with representation and, you know, for us to really be able to take ownership of those things that are ours. And I think a lot of these discussions are a lot about reclaiming things and reclaiming like ownership and title and all the things that have to do with history and kind of where we feel about that. And it looks different for everybody.
And what I think that I think people really do, maybe not instinctually, or I should say cognitively think about, is like you're connected to this tribe through ancestry.
Yeah.
So really through the lineage of your ancestors, are you continuing to have these thoughts and these behaviors?
Yeah.
So if you take the time to really study where you come from and your lineage, then you don't have to create a story or make up a story. You know, the story will just be the story. It's the story of mankind at the end of the day, right? However, I believe that the culture right now is unifying over us wanting to be able to tell our story and express it so that everyone can agree on an objective truth.
Right.
Like, what's just objectively, are we, we'll adopt the metric system, different sciences, we'll use these tools. Can we agree on all the truths of this objective situation?
Yeah.
When that day comes, that'll be great if it's on the outside, but really we need that on the inside.
Yes,
knowledge of self.
Yes.
So
100%.
Yeah, so we're just in this stage right now where we are creating institutions to better educate people of this cultural ancestral line.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because there are some forces that appear to be objective. However, I also believe that they're just being tribal. They're just doing what humans do to protect their tribe.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you talked about like the inside, right? And that's what a lot of people don't do, kind of like the self work. And do you really know your identity? Do you know yourself without your tribe, without certain people, certain groups around you? And like, what is your mindset and your thinking? And so for me, if it's not obvious, I'm biracial. So I'm Black and white, and also Native Cherokee. And so for me, identity has been a huge thing, like a huge thing. Who do I identify with, and where do I fit in? And I think kind of fitting in as a biracial child and as a woman that's biracial, I'm probably finally at the age of 34 coming into like understanding myself and who I am and being comfortable with that. My hair, I never rocked my hair like this. Like, this is 3 years of growth after chopping it off from straightening it for years and years and dyeing it like completely blonde, like all those things. And it wasn't because I wanted to identify as more white. It was just at the time and where I was living, that's kind of what the trend was, and kind of following suit. And but I also grew up in a Black community. Like, I was raised by primarily my mother's mom, so my grandmother, and my dad. And, but I've always identified, I guess you can say in a sense, more with my Black side of my family, and identify as a Black woman. So, it's just really kind of understanding those things. And I've told that I'm very relatable to a lot of people, but people will look at me and they'll automatically assume like I'm Hispanic, or I've had people come speak Spanish to me, and then I had a lady get mad at me because I didn't say it back, and I was like, I'm not Hispanic, I'm sorry, so kind of all of those things. But it's like the cultural responsiveness comes down to like that level, and how are you open-minded to people. And for me in general, like, I don't respond to people, even children, and even as I taught, I don't look at them based off of what they look like. It's your character. How are you approaching me? How are you talking to me? And, and sometimes we have to kind of speak up on the spot. I'll tell you this, and some people don't like to go out to eat with me because I kind of like can sense a lot of people's like energy, and especially like when say if you're out to eat and maybe not a place that's like comfortable for all people, if you know what I mean. And so if I'm in a place where I feel that I'm gonna have like a little bit of tension kind of walking into a room, and I've had a waitress at one point, I recall, she kind of, you could tell like she just felt some type of way towards the group of people I was at my table. And you have to say something in a sense of like, did I do something wrong to you? And it's like, I can't recall off the top of my head like what I said to her, but it's more of like making that visual eye contact. Like, I know you're you're looking at me some type of way, like, and, you know, kind of kill them with kindness type of thing, and kind of turn it around. And but in a sense of like, if you're not liking how people or organizations or whoever you're working with, like, treating you in a cultural way, like, you have to be able to speak up and say it kind of in the moment instead of waiting till later.
You know, that sounds great in theory, unless you're not a confrontational person.
Me?
And you just, no, like, just to, like, I understand that energy.
Yeah.
I just know some people are not confrontational.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make it any better. Like, they shouldn't still have to deal with that.
Right.
But to advocate for themselves, or even in a positive way, you know, is everything cool with us?
Yeah.
They just won't do it. You know what I mean?
And so for those that that cannot speak out, you know, or a lack of don't like confrontation, you know, you got to be able to let it go, because that's too when some people hold all of that on their shoulder, like, why does people treat me this way, like all of those things. And if they can't let that go because they can't speak up for themselves, you know, then that's going to just put extra weight on you. So that kind of goes like in a whole other direction. But yeah, so I kind of I kind of got off on that one.
No, that's great.
And so kind of like in a sense to of all of those things, and again, primarily, you know, when we're focusing in on education, it is based off of you know, for educators, principals, teachers, counselors, therapists, all of those things. Do you understand the environment that you're working in? If you're not from that city, especially if you're in a lower income, working in lower income or Title I school, do you understand the ins and outs of that community, whatever that looks like, right? And we're seeing a lot of things being removed from education. You know, we see removal of social emotional learning because people think behavior is being affected by too much social emotional learning. But at the end of the day, like, do we not want our kids to know how to regulate themselves starting from an early age? You know, and then on top of...
Could you explain social emotional?
Yeah. So social emotional learning, again, it's they call it that as like a curriculum. So certain districts and schools, and even you'll see it frequent in businesses now, are giving tools to help being able to identify, manage and regulate your own emotions. And so you'll see it starting like in kindergarten. They'll do things like brain breaks or mini activities, or just a feeling checks, like, hey, how are you feeling today, when you walk in, and they point to like a specific smiley face. One that gives teachers you know, the capacity to gauge the student with how they're feeling that morning. Or for me, like when I was teaching high school and I would have the students come in, I would do kind of like a check with them daily, and just, you know, if my kids knew when I was teaching that I was like an open door, and they could speak to me on any and all things. And, you know, with the stipulation of I was a mandatory reporter, so if something, you weren't going to endanger yourself, and, you know, all these things, if you were in trouble, like, I would have to report those things. But
I feel like there's been some improvements in our educational system, because I don't recall that being a thing. You know, in my at least grade level education, being able to have an open door to express.
Yeah. And so not every teacher was like me, I guess, in a sense. I shared one of my students had commented with me on my podcast about some things that I did with him and how I supported him. He had a baby at 10 in 10th grade, and how all the other teachers kind of looked at it, down upon him, but I helped support him, you know, and he didn't know how to change a diaper. I showed him on one of our fake babies that we had, you know, kind of those types of things. And even though that's not like a tactic in social emotional learning to teach a child that, but it's more like being there for them and not judging them. And then the other component, like in as adults, you know, I even have trainings at my job. You can see, like, do you need, you know, how do you handle exhaustion if you are, like, you know, overworked or overwhelmed with work? And it's just kind of giving you tools on how to manage your day-to-day. And you can kind of say it's like counseling or therapy, but it's condensed in a way where teachers can do it with children in schools.
No, that's phenomenal. That's really great.
Yeah.
We have to do this again. We have the podcast again. Do you promise to come back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotta do another one.
Okay.
Because I have another educator I'm going to introduce you after our session concludes here. Can you please let people know where to find you, social media, how they can connect with you?
Yep. So you can find me on the Virtuoso Educator. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and then I have just started a YouTube channel, so I'm working on some series there. And then you'll see my email. I'm also working again with my podcast, so if any educators or families or parents want to have a discussion with me on those topics, I'm open to having you guys on with me as well.
Oh, so dope. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right.
My